Welcome back, everybody. You join me free falling towards our base again because we are going to change it up. Today is going to be slightly different where I will start showing you more of the process, but it does mean we will get through less. But that's okay. I think you're used to it by now. There's no way to make Greg Tech fun or flashy, as someone so eloquently put it. We've got a few paths to head down today. I think the first part is that we need to upgrade our sieving. We are slowly not accumulating enough resources. We also are going to have to start looking at some more power generation, either nuclear or solar. Nuclear is going to look like this, and that's a bit worrying, so maybe we hold off on that? Who knows? And the final part is maybe we look at upgrading our circuits. That's going to take a lot as well. So let's start with the basics and let's look at our sieving setup. So as we descend closer towards the base, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and stay tuned for this episode. Let's get into it. So first of all, we actually need to find out what's wrong with our current sieving setup. So let's just work backwards. Is our ore production and processing slow? Looking at when the resources come in and how quickly they're all processed, I don't think that's the issue. Is the issue with our sieves being too slow? I think so. But when we look at upgrading our sieves, now we see the real issue. And the real issue is we can't upgrade our sieves because we can't create enough of our sieving materials. This is why our uranium processing is so slow. This crushed blackstone here, this one sieve, is getting us all of our uraninite. So we found the issue. We need to upgrade our cobble works. And I think here is why it's so slow. Blackstone is being made just too slowly. So the rock crushers are the limiting factors. So now we get to look at our options. We can make the large rock crusher, which will make everything nice and quick. Or we can just make simple EV rock crushers. We will need 4 of them, so that's another 4 amps of EV power. That's okay. And blackstone at EV will be made every 2 ticks, so that's pretty useful. And the other one, cobblestone, again, 0.1 second. So this is actually doable. And I think because we're going to bulk craft them, let's just set a pattern for them. We're also going to need to set a pattern for the diamond grinding head, which means we need 2 more patterns. Diamond dust, which will be a maceration. Of course, you have to scroll through these. Here. And then double steel plates, which we can throw steel ingots through the bender. We need to make sure we set 2 ingots. Don't worry about the circuit. And then we have our processing pattern. Into the providers. And we should be able to request 4 rock crushers. No, we're missing neodymium. Well, we have lots of dust, but we actually don't have any ingots. So into our processing barrel, neodymium will go. And it won't start because we have no helium, so we need to change the circuit to 1. And there we go. And so while we wait for that, we also need to set up the actual processing. So we need, I think it would be about 6 forge hammers. So we need to set the recipe for forge hammers, including the anvil and the iron blocks. And then we need 1 EV macerator, which we can probably just request now. Yeah, there we go. Requested. Alright, so the EV macerator is done. Right, and so because we actually also have power to worry about now, we need to replace all of the signalum cable here, once we've placed our machines, of course, with enderium wires. It actually doesn't matter what wire you use to connect the flux sieve with. As long as it's providing power, it'll automatically convert it into RF. And each sieve with the full diamond upgrades in here is only going to consume 512 EU per tick, which is 1 high voltage amp. So even this full setup here is only going to use 2 EV amps. But this is all going to add up. So once we've upgraded our sieving, I'm going to turn off a few other things and we're going to work on a different form of power. Alright, and here are the rock crushers. So we need 4 of them. Easy craft. And it's beautiful. These machines don't actually take any circuits, so they're effectively free. That is because we set everything up on passive, which is your reminder. Set everything up on passive. And while those are whirling away, we need to just make sure we get the right amount of forge hammers, which I believe is 6. 1 for gravel, 2 for sand, 3 for dust. And that shouldn't be too difficult, other than the 10 EV circuits. Looks to be fine. Let's just get it going. Rock crushers are done. And all the forge hammers have now crafted. And obviously, as you can tell, that took a while. Okay, so here's the plan. I'm going to show this once, and then I'm hoping that you guys will understand exactly what's going on from the previous episode on how these work. So effectively, this rock breaker here is going to create whatever I put into it as long as it's next to water and lava. The rocks will be extracted through this pipe up into whatever cobbleworks it needs to be. For dust, it's 3 forge hammers. For blackstone, it's a single macerator. So we're actually just going to keep the bones of the system the same. There's no need to change it up if it already works. So we'll just replace the rock crushers and the igneous extruders with our EV counterparts. Then we can think about upgrading, assuming that we have the rates. I am aware of the large sieve cobbleworks. That's going to be for another episode because it requires purified netherite. We will get it though, because you can make 2048 sand in 8 seconds, and if we run it at IV, we can make it in 2. We just need to produce water and lava constantly. Not a difficult task at all, but let's get this going. So all we need to do is replace the rock crusher. Absolutely forget about obsidian. That's really smart of me. And that's actually also the macerator, so how about we put the macerator over here, and the rock crusher here. That seems like the smart thing to do. Oh dear. Well, that wasn't very smart at all. I actually don't have any lava at the moment. So, I guess let's do this the old-fashioned way. Fill that full of lava. We'll let that run while we set everything up. So the next one is going to be dust. So let's actually pick up our bucket of lava and place down our rock crusher. And then we replace the forge hammers and place the lava back. And so now we come to what I'm going to describe as the not so fun part, and that is rewiring this absolute mess. So we can start by disconnecting the high voltage line, removing the transformer, emptying my inventory of all the garbage. And now it should be safe just to vein mine all of the signalum and 60, so we're actually going to need more enderium wire later. But that's fine. So then we will just start to place all of our wiring, making sure that we connect it. Let's configure the machine as well to output to the drawer. Come down through our little wiring channel, and then continue around. I completely forgot that this is here. We don't need this anymore. And there we are. So all of this should now be connected. I think we're actually going to need to put some upgrades in here and actually set them correctly. And that's already got an upgrade, so that's fine. But once we place our lava here, this is just going to start working, assuming we plug in the power. And since we're working on it now, let's also remove this main power line here. This medium voltage... Well, that was a mistake. Whoops. Let's fix that. Alright, it's all fixed up and ready to go. That was slightly painful, but let's see how fast this rock crusher is. Yep, 2 ticks, nice and quick. Macerator is 1 tick. Not bad. Now let's see. Alright, it's still filling up. Man, these sieves are hungry. So I have put in, we would consume 64 every 80 ticks with these 3 upgrades. And we're actually still going down. The EV rock breakers aren't enough to carry 1 fully upgraded diamond sieve. But hopefully 2 will do. We actually don't need this. We don't need crushed blackstone for much. Pretty much only gets us sheltonite and uraninite. And now let's have a look at how fast resources are coming in. If we hold shift when you're in an AE2 terminal, all icons remain the same even when there is nothing left. So let's hold shift and see how quickly we accumulate resources. So definitely lots of apatite, that's good, that's our chlorine supply. Lots more topaz now, very good, that's our fluorine and hydrogen supply. There's rare earth and phosphorus. The one I'm really looking for, no, there's more topaz, that's also good. The one I'm looking for the most is our uraninite. So that's the one from Blackstone that I upgraded as much as I could, because if we're going to use nuclear power, then we need to increase our production. Let's have a look at the chance then. If this isn't actually increasing, let's see. So pitch blend is a 2% chance. I see why we're not getting very much. Well, I guess our uranium production will remain slightly gimped until we can get the sieve cobbleworks and the sieves. And it could be useful to use the large sieve, which guarantees all of the drops and doesn't require changes of meshes. But at IV and taking 20 seconds, while if we used the full upgrades here, we would have a full stack of processing at high voltage. I think maybe just continuing with these flux sieves is going to be the way to go for now, even though they are a little bit irritating. So we now also have about 40 buckets of radon, so I think it's time we put our chemical reactor on pause for now, because it is chewing through our uranium stores. Hey, guess what? It's power time. So obviously, there are many upgrades to our power that we can do. Originally, I wanted to go with high octane gasoline, but you need power to create power and yada yada yada. It's GregTech power. I haven't actually used any other power mods in a while because I've just been playing pure GregTech. So why don't we try Solar Flux Reborn? It doesn't look too bad, I'll be honest. These just get upgraded with power. And they only take diodes, capacitors, some wafers, tin, and soldering alloy. So how bad could it possibly be? I'm thinking that what we should start to work towards is these elite solar generators. So these will do 2,500 EU per tick, which is roughly 1 EV amp while the sun is shining. They take 3 silicon wafers, double tungsten steel plates, soldering alloy, we have all of these, and then we just need the elite solar cell. And it's IV circuits and fiber reinforced printed circuit boards. Also platinum cable, we have that, that's fine. Soldering, glass panes. Most of this is actually fine. The cores are just going to take a lot of power, and this is epoxy. So we actually now need to set up epoxy resin. And it might be time to start working on some better circuits, but we'll see. First things first is we need to tackle this mess, which is epoxy. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Epoxy resin is not that hard. When you're playing GregTech, there are 2 things you should always look for. And the first one is there a large chemical reactor recipe for it? And is it a shortcut recipe? And if it's got a program circuit like 24, it's probably a shortcut. So here's the shortcut recipe. It's a shortcut because we don't need to craft bisphenol A, so we only need 2 chemical reactors. We also get to recycle our salt water, and we can just distill some diluted hydrochloric acid back to some chlorine. So all we need to do is make epichlorohydrin. And is there a circuit 24 recipe here? You bet there is. In fact, there's 2. There's a 24 and a 23. It basically just changes what outputs you're going to get. Are you going to get 2 buckets or 1 bucket? And I'll be honest, circuit 23 recipe is just much easier. So let's start building it, and I'll show you why people get confused. So first off, we're going to need to request 2 chemical reactor controllers. We're also going to need to request a few more interfaces, 15 high voltage. Okay. And in our bag, we've got high voltage energy hatches, which is how we'll run the machines. And I think we have enough input and output hatches for us to get this started. And some tape as well. Yep, all right, we've got everything. So all we need to do is wait for these 2 to finish. So these bloody circuits that are taking so long to craft these days, we're definitely going to have to upgrade them. All right, easy peasy. Here we go. 2 chemical reactor controllers. Pipe casings behind them. Sneaky trick here, share the coil. Maintenance hatches, power supplies. And now let's figure out the input hatches. So the final recipe, that's a lot of input hatches. The final recipe is going to have 5 input and 3 output. So 3 output hatches. We'll make 4 of our output hatches input hatches with the screwdriver. Place them all down. And then 1 needs to be an input bus for salt. Done. Multi-block formed. Wiring this up is going to be a pain. Then epichlorohydrin is 4 inputs and 3 outputs. So 3 fluid inputs, 3 fluid outputs. We have just enough buses. And we need a salt input again. No, pardon me, we actually need a sodium hydroxide input. So 1 input bus. So inputs, outputs, input bus. So now all of these are wired up. So here's the trick for epoxy resin. This is where most people will trip up because they haven't set this up early. You need phenol, acetone. These are from organic distillation. So we have all of these already. So that's already free. Hydrochloric acid, we've already set up a chemical reactor to make. Epichlorohydrin, the difficult way to do this is if you're making biodiesel, you can use glycerol and hydrochloric acid to make water and epichlorohydrin. I think that's an okay way if you really want to do that. The real free way to do that is to combine chlorine with propene and water to get epichlorohydrin, some hydrochloric acid, and salt water. And the salt water comes from sodium hydroxide here, so then you can just electrolyze the salt water to get the sodium hydroxide back, and it goes into the system. And again, you can also use allyl chloride and hypochlorous acid. Allyl chloride is propene and chlorine, but why would you do that in this recipe when this is the shortcut here to skip allyl chloride? So I hope that helped. That's usually where most people trip up, and that's where I used to trip up. But using these two chemical reactors with the shortcuts, large oil distillation, and our organic distillation setup. So let's put our tape on our chemical reactors and let's set this up. You just saw how the recipes are, so I trust you just to go back if you really need to. But again, we're going to be using this shortcut recipe with epichlorohydrin, phenol, acetone, and hydrochloric acid, as well as sodium hydroxide, running that through, redistilling this into hydrochloric acid, electrolyzing our salt water into sodium hydroxide and chlorine. And we're going to make epichlorohydrin from chlorine, propene, water, and sodium hydroxide, doing the same thing here with hydrochloric acid just going into our buffers and salt water being used for sodium hydroxide. And so now to kickstart the process, we need sodium hydroxide, and we can just make that by crafting some salt water. Salt water is as simple as salt and water. Crazy, right? And then we're just going to send it through our large electrolyzer. This is currently only working on hydrogen sulfide produced by these little chemical reactors, and it does it so fast that I'm okay tying it up with a little bit of salt water. So let's just make 256 buckets. It shouldn't take that long. It would probably be useful if I actually set a fluid output on this. There we go. So that's going into a storage cell, hopefully about to be electrolyzed. So the epoxy resin recipe we're using is circuit 24. So don't forget to set your circuit numbers in your input buses. So circuit 24. Okay, and this should start the process now. I have the sodium hydroxide in an input bus. I could make a ULV one, but I can't be bothered automating wrought iron and stuff. So I've just put cobblestone into the input bus just to stop it from overfilling. And our epichlorohydrin recipe is circuit 23. So let's set to circuit 23 and watch it raw. All right, there we go, turned on. So epichlorohydrin is now being produced, and right now there's just a buffering issue with our fluid cells. We just have too much fluid in some of the cells. And once we get rid of that, then the epoxy resin chemical reactor will turn on. So the buffering issue is here. There's just too much sulfuric acid. I don't know what that first fluid is. I don't know why we have 3,700 buckets of some unknown white substance in there. And then I don't know. I honestly don't know how to clean these out. I find them quite irritating. I'll be honest, I'm also not entirely certain how we ended up with this much sulfuric acid, given that our system should be able to detect that there's 8 million in the super tank. So I don't really know why we're still making sulfuric acid. And we have these guys to deal with now. Okay, so it looks like we're actually maxed out on epichlorohydrin storage here because there's nowhere for it to go. And while we wait for our epoxy, I think it's time we start to actually take a good hard look at these energy cores. So they don't look too difficult. We can make diodes and capacitors. It's weird that it's picked that capacitor. We already make tin. That is going to be a little bit more challenging to automate, but shouldn't be too difficult. And glass panes, which also aren't too difficult. So let's just make sure we take a look. It's 2 diodes. And we'll use the proper SMD capacitor. We need 4 of them. So we'll pull that recipe down. Silicon wafers, we can just manually do that. I'm happy to do that. And glass panes, which I believe we can just cutting saw. Not too bad. I'm going to always keep messing that up. Cutting saw isn't bad. It's just the same recipe as vanilla, but you need to run it through a cutting saw instead of crafting it. Because it's Greg Tech as usual. So we have 312 silicon wafers. Pretty handy there. And let's just start basic by making a few basic energy cores. Don't worry about crushed tin being in there. Right, so that would be the hold up here is I'm only running my molecular assemblers here. I'm only running my basic patterns through 1 molecular assembler. But I speed that up a little bit. I'll definitely redo this, don't worry. Oh, that would be why we're still stuck on the fluid cell, of course. There we go. Now there's a soldering alloy in there. Also, the real holdup was that these need to be put into a assembling machine. A circuit assembler, actually. So into my poor, overworked, high voltage circuit assembler they go. Let's try that again. Once these circuits are finished crafting for some more storage components. Or not. Win. Well, there's the first step. So now we need to make the energy assembler, which is not difficult at all. What an odd conversion. Shouldn't be too bad. I think we can make everything. Yep. also, oh, just in a regular assembler. That's nice. We're missing cobalt rods, so let's just make them manually. We only need 12, which will just run through the lathe. Okay, buffering issue is now over. We are making epoxy resin. And I want to pause that because I forgot to set a storage location for it. We'll just place a storage bus here, set for epoxy resin, and then we can place our super tank, make sure we set the output somewhere else, and then it should automatically go into our tank once we actually get it working. Because I can bet there's some, yeah, there's five buckets of epoxy in our fluid cell. So now we can turn this on and get rid of all of that epichlorohydrin and finally get ourselves some epoxy. And so let's just request the energy assembler. Let's just watch it craft. I think it needs to be on circuit 0. Oh, or not. There's just not enough diodes or capacitors in there because of course there isn't. 16 capacitors, 4 diodes. Okay. Okay, let's just put those in there and there we go. Done. And now we have the energy assembler. So what we can do with the energy assembler is we can just plug it directly into the main line, like so. Oop, or not. That doesn't look like that's working. Luckily, I still have an EV 4 amp converter. So now it's converting GregTech into FE. We can put our energy assembler here. Oh, actually, maybe it just... Oh, that was fast. And then let's put a pattern provider. I'm not sure if this can auto output. I have an idea. It's terrible, but it's an idea. So now we can set our upgrade recipes for all of our solar energy cores. And let's see, can we get an ultimate energy core? Actually, I think we only need elite. Yeah, we only need elite. Yep, we definitely can. This is awesome. And then it's just going to take, oh, a lot of time. Oh, that's pretty grim. That's taking in 4 EV amps. And it's barely any power. This could take a while. But with epoxy sorted, we can now make our epoxy circuit boards. So sheets to boards to printed circuit boards. And we can also make the reinforced boards as well, which are the ones that we need for the solar panels we're going for. So let's have a look. We have our ultimate energy core, which is great. And now let's encode the recipes for our epoxy. So we need to make epoxy sheets, which means we'll need a solidifier. So I think what we'll do is we'll just add that to the passive. So we'll worry about that later. Now, epoxy sheets will need to chemical react. Doesn't matter in what chemical reactor, but we need sulfuric acid, which is 0.5 there. Make sure you have middle mouse unbound from everything else so that you can change that to our modifying amounts. Gold foils, which we can't make yet, so we'll put those on our favorites list by pressing A. We'll set the gold foil recipe while we're here as well. So we have a circuit 10 set up, so we'll just do that. And then once we have the board, we need electrum foils and our sodium persulfate, which is 1 full bucket. We can already make electrum foils and we can make the sheets. So wonderful, perfect and good. Now we need to make our fiber reinforced boards here, which is going to be liquid epoxy and raw carbon fibers. And we can already make carbon fibers. We have now made a liquid epoxy, so we can make the reinforced boards. The reinforced boards need annealed copper and sulfuric acid. We don't make annealed copper yet, so let's make annealed copper foils. We already have circuit 10 again, and we do make annealed copper, so that's great, that's easy. And then we have 2 things we can do. We can make another multi-layer board, and then we need to make this fiber board. And this is going to be with sodium persulfate again. So there we are. That's annealed copper foil, which we're making still. All right, perfect. Now, multi-layer. This is the final circuit board before we get to wetware. We're not going to worry about this yet, but it needs 2 boards, palladium foil, and 0.5. So 0.5 buckets of sulfuric acid. We need palladium foil. Yeah, we've already got that. So palladium foil. And palladium foil is just a palladium ingot in circuit 10. That's the wrong palladium ingot. That's the right one. We also need to be able to make palladium ingots, which is a blast furnace recipe, so we won't worry about that now. And then the final part is platinum and sodium persulfate. So that's pretty easy. And platinum, we will need to set a bending recipe. And we'll need to set a multi-smelter recipe, which is just... Where's the dust? Platinum dust. Done. So that's all the recipes we need to automate up to the final board in the game before wetware. That's not that bad, right? It's going to hurt that these take 15 seconds each in a regular chemical reactor. If we use a large chemical reactor, however, and we hold shift to perfect overclock, we can get that down to 3.75 seconds. Will this clean room right now fit a large chemical reactor? So for now, bad recipes it is. Let's set those up. We're going to need to upgrade this to an extended pattern terminal. All the boards. All the printed boards. Into the multi-smelter. All into the bender. And the chemical bath. So we'll grab our plate mold and a low voltage fluid solidifier. Back over at our solidification wall. And I'm now realizing I didn't need to bring any of this. These have all got downgrades, which is super handy. So we can put a pump on the bottom for import and make sure we set it to import. Set the item out port to the top. Grab a fluid interface. Grab the epoxy resin. Done. Simple as that. And now we have epoxy resin sheets on passive. And they're stack limited to 64. And don't forget to press partition storage on the storage bus so that the ME system can read the epoxy sheets. So now we have epoxy sheets. Let's get the quest. Let's craft an epoxy circuit board. Grab the quest for that as well. And now let's make the epoxy printed circuit board. And there we are, epoxy printed circuits. The next step, while it seems it needs borosilicate glass, we can actually just use carbon fibers. We'll probably need to make this later, but for now we're just skipping it. And here's just a little trick for getting through the quest book even when you don't have the thing. I'm not sure if there's better ways to do it. The developer has made me look like a fool in previous episodes by commenting much better strategies than I've been able to figure out. But for now, this is the way that I've been getting through these locked quests without having to do benzene and dichlorobenzene and phenol when I make phenol other ways. I can just click the editing mode, right click, and complete instantly. And now I can get the quest properly. So, reinforced epoxy resin sheet. Let's go. Quick as. Done. And now let's get a fiber reinforced printed circuit board. Actually want the fiber reinforced circuit board first. All done. And then the fiber reinforced printed circuit board, which again is just annealed copper. And there we are, fiber reinforced printed circuit boards. Let's just claim all those. And now here's where we get a little bit complicated. So that was kind of the main limiting factor here, except for the fact that this requires an IV assembler. We don't make IV power yet. So we're going to need an extreme voltage transformer to make an amp of IV power from 4 EV amps. This is going to get expensive. And we need to set a recipe for platinum cables. Oh dear. Platinum cables are going to require a new set of rubber. Well, I think we'll save rubber for the next episode as we progress further into IV. We've worked through some epoxy resin right now, and what we're going to do is I think we're just going to make our advanced circuit assembler, and then we'll call it there. So there's actually a bit of an error in the quest page here. If we look at the quest for the advanced circuit assembler 3, it actually says we need a quantum star, which needs nether stars and all of this chain here. It doesn't. The EV circuit assembler doesn't need a quantum star. It only needs a quantum eye, which we can make now because we have radon. So we can upgrade our circuit assembler and prepare ourselves for nanocircuits. And then the next episode will probably tackle our power. EV circuit assembler for us is as easy as just making the emitter and then clicking the request button. And the emitter, we're just missing 2 things, platinum rods and quantum eyes. Platinum rods are a lathing recipe. Quantum eyes are as simple as an ender eye and 250 millibuckets of radon. Do you ever stop making noise? I don't think so. So quantum eye into the chemical bath, platinum rod into the lathe. Let's request the emitter. Shouldn't take too long. Okay, emitter is crafted. And now we can just request the rest, which is going to take ages considering these are IV circuits, and that took ages to make the EV circuits. And I've come back from just mucking around, and here we are. Everything's all crafted, and I have 2 eggs. Isn't that fantastic? So we'll get our circuit assembler, and I think that's about time we wrap it up for here. I feel like even with the slight change of format, we've actually still managed to achieve a lot today, and I feel quite relaxed about having to put this all together. There's a hole in the floor, and it goes straight down. Strange. Anyway, I'm feeling really hopeful for the rest of this series now. With the IV quest page starting to unlock, power about to become completely free with solar generators, and some lovely new chemical processes along the way, I think the base is really going to open up soon. And as much as I love these little guys, I think it could be time soon to replace them. But that's definitely for later. For next time, we're going to work on bringing more power to the base, bringing more power to our circuitry, and actually finishing off our air distillation, which we were going to do in the last episode. So if that all sounds fancy to you, how about you like, subscribe, and tune in next time for more of me. And as always, bye!